I had a realization about you today that might surprise you. You were never meant to stay, only to awaken something inside me. I realized that even when I stopped talking to you, I never stopped talking about you in my mind. It hit me today. You were both my peace and my chaos, and I kept choosing you because I feared silence more than pain. I had a realization about you today. You were never mine to keep, just a mirror showing me the love I needed to give myself. I realized I was in love with the way you made me feel seen, not necessarily with the person you became. I had a realization. I never hated you. I only hated the version of me that begged for your attention. Today, I realized you didn't change. I just finally saw you without the illusion my love created. I had a realization about you. Maybe you were my lesson in disguise, not my destiny in waiting. I realized today that I wasn't addicted to you. I was addicted to the story I created about us. I had a realization. Your silence said more truth than your words ever could. I realized you were never confusing. I just kept pretending not to see the truth because I loved you too much. I had a realization today that might surprise you. I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I need peace more than closure. I realized that missing you doesn't mean I want you back. It just means I remember the parts of me that loved deeply. I had a realization about you. Maybe you were never cruel, just broken in ways I tried to fix with love. I realized that you never really left. Parts of you still echo in everything I do. I had a realization. You didn't ruin me. You revealed what I refused to heal. Today, I realized that I don't crave your presence anymore, just the version of me that existed when you cared. I had a realization about you. You weren't my home, just a place where I learned how to stand on my own. I realized today that love doesn't always fade. Sometimes it transforms into quiet acceptance. I had a realization. I stopped waiting for your apology the moment I learned to validate my own pain. I realized that loving you wasn't my mistake. Holding on after the ending was. I had a realization about you. Your indifference was your truth, and my hope was my denial. I realize today that I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired of remembering what I once begged to forget. I had a realization. You didn't choose me, but maybe that was the universe's way of protecting me. I realize today that closure doesn't come from you. It comes from finally understanding why it had to end. I had a realization. I was never chasing you. I was chasing the comfort I once felt in your presence. I realized today that I mistook emotional chaos for passion because I was desperate to feel alive. I had a realization. Maybe the universe separated us so I could meet myself. I realized today that you were never the villain. I just wanted you to love me the way I loved you. I had a realization. Sometimes love ends not because it's weak, but because one person outgrows their pain. I realized today that I don't hate you. I hate how easily you moved on while I was still bleeding. I had a realization. I used to pray for you. Now I just hope you find what I wanted to give. I realized that love isn't about who stays. It's about who teaches you what staying means. I had a realization. Maybe we met too early, or maybe exactly when we needed to fall apart. I realized today that I can love you and still let you go. Both can coexist in the same heart. I had a realization. Your absence is no longer a wound. It's a whisper of who I've become. I realize today that I never lost you. I simply found a stronger version of myself through the pain. I had had a realization. You were the poem I couldn't finish, and now I understand it was never meant to rhyme. I realized today that not every connection is meant to last. Some are meant to ignite and teach. I had a realization. Maybe love wasn't supposed to save us, just shape us into who we're becoming. I realized today that your goodbye wasn't cruelty. It was honesty I wasn't ready to hear. I had a realization. I fell for your potential, not your reality, and that was my heartbreak's foundation. I realized today that no one really leaves. They just become memories you learn to live with. I had a realization. I kept waiting for you to change, not realizing I was the one evolving. I realize today that I'm not scared of losing you anymore. I'm scared of forgetting how much I grew because of you. I had a realization. You were never my soulmate. You were my soul's awakening. I realize today that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means walking away with grace. I had a realization. Your love was the storm, but I became the calm that followed. I realize today that maybe I don't need answers. Maybe peace is just accepting the unknown. I had a realization today that might surprise you. I stopped replaying our memories, not because I forgot, but because they no longer hurt. I realized that I wasn't in love with who you are now, but with the version of you I once believed in. I had a realization. You never broke me. You simply uncovered the strength I didn't know I had. I realized today that I was never too much for you. You were simply not ready to handle real depth. I had a realization. The love I gave you was pure. even if you couldn't recognize its worth. I realized today that what I called love was sometimes my fear of being alone, disguised as devotion. I had a realization. Your absence taught me more about love than your presence ever did. I realize today that closure isn't an ending. It's a beginning of peace without you. I had a realization. I used to think losing you would destroy me, but now I see it rebuilt me instead. I realize today that some people never truly leave. They just live quietly inside our lessons. I had a realization. You didn't stop loving me. You just started loving your comfort more than my chaos. I realized today that love shouldn't feel like waiting for someone to notice your pain. I had a realization. Every time you ignored me, the universe was guiding me closer to self-worth. I realize today that I no longer want to be understood by you. I just want to understand myself better. I had a realization. I can still wish you well without wishing you back. I realize today that you never truly saw me. You only saw what you needed me to be. I had a realization. I used to chase your love. Now I chase my peace. I realized today that loving you was like dancing in the dark, beautiful but full of unseen bruises. I had a realization. You weren't my forever. You were my awakening to what forever should feel like. I realize today that silence doesn't mean indifference. Sometimes it's just the sound of healing. I had a realization. I stopped seeking your energy because mine finally started to feel enough. I realized today that love doesn't always mean two people ending up together. Sometimes it's one person finally standing alone. I had a realization. You didn't teach me how to love. You taught me how to survive heartbreak. I realize today that I used to think you were my missing piece, but I was never incomplete. I had a realization. Maybe I was never supposed to be loved by you, just remembered by you. I realize today that I'm finally at peace with not being your choice. I had a realization. I used to cry for you. Now I thank you in silence. I realize today that I don't need your attention to feel significant. My worth doesn't live in your eyes anymore. I had a realization. Love isn't about possession. It's about permission to grow apart gracefully. I realize today that what I once called heartbreak was actually transformation in disguise. I had a realization. I kept forgiving you, not because you deserved it, but because I deserved freedom. I realize today that I no longer seek revenge. I seek understanding. I had a realization. I used to fear the day you'd forget me. Now I hope you do, so we both can heal. I realize today that your leaving wasn't abandonment. It was redirection. I had a realization. I was never hard to love. You were just too afraid to love deeply. I realized today that sometimes the hardest part of healing is accepting that you were never coming back. I had a realization. The love I gave you was my masterpiece. I don't regret painting it. I realized today that maybe your silence was the universe's loudest answer. I had a realization. I kept waiting for your apology, not realizing I already gave it to myself. I realized today that love isn't about who stays longest. It's about who teaches you what real connection feels like. I had a realization. You were never my soulmate. You were my soul's turning point. I realized today that your goodbye was actually my rebirth. I had a realization. I used to fear forgetting you, but now forgetting is my freedom. I realize today that love doesn't die. It just changes form and learns to live in silence. I had a realization. Your indifference wasn't a punishment. It was clarity. I realize today that I don't need your presence to validate my emotions anymore. I had a realization. What I thought was the end of love was the beginning of self-respect. I realize today that you weren't meant to understand me. You were meant to awaken me. I had a realization. Love isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing yourself when no one else does. I realize today that every goodbye carries a hidden blessing in disguise. I had a realization. Maybe we were never meant to last, only to collide beautifully for a moment in time. I realized today that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's releasing the weight of what's already gone.